Today what I want to show you is the electrical system that I'm going to install in the car. And what I mean by that is I'm going to install an electrical system that can run appliances. So in the car I'm going to have a refrigerator cooler, a cooler that actually has a thermostat on it so I can set the exact temperature that I want, that I can keep items in that need to be kept cold. I'm also going to have a toaster oven in order to cook things, and also a hot plate is another way to cook things in pans. And I've also purchased a small Instapot, the smallest one that they make, so I can have a way to cook foods quickly, almost as quickly as a microwave, but with a lot less power usage. And so what I've got today that I'm going to show you first is, this is a breaker. Used for is to protect an electrical system. So if you live in a house or apartment, you've got a breaker box somewhere, and each breaker goes to a wire or series of wires to make sure that electricity doesn't flow through the wires at a level that the wires can't handle, which is called an overload. Because if too much electricity flows through wires that aren't large enough to handle that electricity, they heat up and they can actually cause fires. And so a breaker helps to protect against that, and also protect against things like surges. But in this situation, I'm not too concerned about overloads, because the inverter that I purchased actually has a lot of safeguards in it. It's already got fuses inside of it that allow it to protect against an under voltage and over voltage and overload and short circuit and even temperature protection. So the purpose of the breaker that I'm using is actually to act like a switch, so I can turn the electricity off and on when I connect or disconnect the inverter. And so when I run my battery into this terminal and then connect the inverter, this is the cable that'll connect to the inverter, and I can just clip it on there when I'm ready to use the inverter. What I can do is when it's on, I've used the appliances and I'm done using it and I want to pack my inverter up because I'm done cooking for the day, I can flip this off, disconnect the inverter without any concern for sparking or anything like that. And same with reconnecting it. Just keep it off until the next time I use it, then go in and connect everything and then flip it on. And again, I don't have to worry about it sparking every time I touch the connector up here and clip the inverter on. So that's what the purpose of this is. And so what I want to do is, a breaker only worries about the power, the red cord, the power going through, because that's where the surge happens and the breaker breaks to surge protect. It doesn't care about the ground, but I need a place to connect the ground, the black cable. And so I'm going to just create a spot here where I can put a bolt and connect the ground from my battery, and then go ahead, and when I'm ready to hook up my inverter, I'll connect the red cable there, the black cable down here, and we'll be ready to go. And I'm going to put that bolt down here where the ground from the battery will come, because it just makes more sense down here where there's room. I couldn't really put it up here in this hole, because there's just not a lot of room up there to try to connect both of these. So it just makes sense to put it down here, because it's not going to be inside this box where the breaker is. It's just simply going to be a bolt where I can put the ground from the battery on and then connect this right to where the ground is. So, but the one thing that I've got that's an issue is, when I get all this ready to put in the car, I'm going to put some Velcro in the back and stick it to the side of the car, because Velcro sticks really good to the interior fabric of that wall fabric in the car, so I can mount it. So I want this to set flush, but the problem is, where the hole is, it can't sit flush because there's a little ridge in there. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to carefully take this pair of needle nose pliers and break this ridge off, so that this can then sit down flat in there. So then I can go ahead and put some screws on and get it prepared to be able to clip the ground on when I set up the inverter. So let me do that real quick. I pretty much got most of it, but I'm just going to take a little sanding block I've got, just kind of sand down that ridge in there a little bit. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Let's see. So now when we take this bolt and slip it in there, it lays below the surface so we can get it to where we can mount this thing flush. And I'm going to take this little screw, little nut, sorry, and tighten it on here to hold this in place. Okay, and then I'm going to take another one of these, just put it on here kind of shallow. And then use this last one, this last nut to put on the very end. Now, I've got a nice little system that's got a little gap there, so I can just clip that on, clip my power cable on. Now I've got the power and the ground both hooked up, imagining that this is mounted in the car and running down to the battery. I can make sure this is all clipped in. This end will be plugged into the inverter, and I can flip on the power, and we're good to go. I can turn on the power on the inverter and start using it to run my appliances. So now let's go out to the car and I'll show you where I'm going to mount this. Okay, so now I've connected cables to my battery. So you've just got these terminals here where you can connect in other cables if you've got some auxiliary things that you need to connect, and I've connected the negative cable down there to the negative terminal and the positive cable here to the positive terminal. And so now what I'm going to do is connect these to the breaker. Okay, so now I've gotten those good and tightened down. Got the positive to the positive terminal where I can have the breaker off and connect my positive for my inverter here. And I've got the negative terminal clamped down where I can clamp on the negative for the negative terminal for the inverter. So let me back the camera up a little bit and I'll show you how the inverter works. Okay, so here's my inverter. You may have seen it off to the side in some of my previous videos of the back of the car because it's just been sitting back here waiting to be hooked up and used. And so like I mentioned before, we've got these cables, and the reason I bought this inverter specifically is because even though I could hardwire an inverter in here, which is the way a lot of inverters are used, they're hardwired into the battery, kept near the battery, and then things are plugged into them because every inverter's got these outlets to plug in appliances and other things. But for the average person, they're not going to know how to hardwire an inverter in. And so I bought this one so I could show anybody how to use an inverter in their car. Now I'm going to have a whole setup back here where I can connect and disconnect this, but if you lived in your car and you needed an inverter to be able to plug some things into, you could buy this 1,000-watt inverter, which will power quite a few things, and some things I'll show you in future videos. And all you'd have to know how to do is connect these terminals to the back like this. Now you're all hooked up, so if you wanted to connect this to your battery, it wouldn't matter where your battery was. Even if your battery was in the front of your car under the hood, you could pop the hood, connect these to the battery, and then run appliances and other things off of this inverter once it was turned on. So, but for me, I'm going to have a setup back here because my battery's in the back of the car, and so I've got this breaker that's now ready so that I can, whenever I want to use this, I'll take it out from wherever I have it stored, just connect it here. I'll actually connect the ground first because that's always good practice, even though our breaker's got the power shut off anyway. Then connect this up here, and then I can turn it on, and then as you'll be able to see here. Give it a minute to kick on, and now we have power. So you can see in that LED screen that it's ready to be used. There's no output going through it right now because we don't have anything plugged in, but I will plug something in here in a minute just to kind of show you how it powers items. So now we've got a working inverter for our car to power the appliances that I'm going to put in here so that I can have a way to keep food stored and to cook and prepare food. So let me go ahead now and get this breaker mounted where I want it so that it's ready to be used in the future. So what I'm going to do to mount this is I'm going to use what most people refer to as Velcro. That's actually a brand name of the first brand that created the technology, but the generic version is just called hook and loop. And so when I post in my description hook and loop, that's what I mean. And this is the hook part of it, that rough part of what people call Velcro. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect that to the back here and allow myself a way to stick this to the soft surface here, which acts like the loop part of the Velcro. And this is a little bit of an incline, so gravity won't be pulling it straight off. If I tried to mount it up here, gravity may eventually pull it down, even though this hook and this Velcro is pretty strong. But I'm going to just trim this off here. Okay, now let me get all this cleaned up and put back together. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, I wanted to put everything back together. I had to move my camera and wanted to get everything set up to show you. I've got the inverter plugged in, the breaker's on, the inverter's turned on. The 000 here means that there's no wattage going through it because nothing's running right now. But what I'm going to do is turn on this power strip. And right now I've got this hot plate plugged into the power strip. And so when I turn it on, you see the light comes on. And here the inverter now says 873, 74, 75. It's going to stop around 875 watts because that's how many watts this takes to heat up. So this is just one quick simple example of how I'm going to use this power inverter to create electricity in AC form, which is the form of electricity that comes out of your outlets in your house. So I can plug in appliances. I'm going to turn this off so it doesn't get too hot because I'm not cooking anything right now. And so I can use all kinds of things now that I've got AC power and outlets that I couldn't use before because cars run on DC power, direct current power from batteries. And so the only things I could use before are things I could plug into, you know, cigarette lighters or accessory lighters or USB ports in the car. But now I can plug anything that's 1,000 watts or less into this, and I will show you later when I show you my food and cooking setup what all I'm going to plug into here. But that's it for today. Thanks.